So I just want to say welcome to everyone who's come to join us. And I want to drop in and connect with all of our deliciousness on the inside. So I'm going to invite everyone just to take a nice nourishing breath in. And then just let any of those expectations just kind of go out with the breath. So breathing in nourishment, love, joy, peace, silliness, and breathing out any old, stale thoughts, beliefs, expectations. Breathing in our authentic selves, our awareness that we are safe within our bodies. We are safe to be our authentic selves, that we are in a place of no judgment, of no expectation, that we are letting go of any preconceived notions about how this time should go, or what it should be, or how we should bend or contort ourselves to fit into this space. We are free to be ourselves, however silly, weird, awkward, or uncomfortable that may be.
I already love this space today.
Me too. I flipped open, we were having a pre-conversation. I mean, we don't script any of this. We don't plan any of this other than to have a general topic that we're thinking of, which this month we've been talking about. The last 4 weeks, we've been exploring body. We talked about, we could talk about plastic surgery, we could talk about intuition and instinct, we could talk about all different kinds of things. And I was like, well, I'm just going to flip open to my Gene Keys book and look at what it says about 41. And I just giggled when I got here. The great teaching of this key is about letting go of our plans. We can plan, and we must plan in small ways, such as what to eat the next day, or when and where we'll meet a friend, or to go on holiday. These are small plans. Then there's the big planning of fantasy. We fall in love, get married, and fall victim to a fantasy of the perfect life with the perfect person, and it doesn't turn out that way at all. In a year, it's all changed. They aren't who we thought they were, and instead it's difficult or painful. Brenda, what did you find on the 41 in human design? Did you have an opportunity?
I did, I've got it pulled up. 41 is the gate of imagination. You have the keys to a rich imagination that can lead to all sorts of amazing experiences, just as long as you know the difference between realism and fantasy. Your dreams are so vivid that they can empower others to believe in them. The pressure from the root brings a need to make your fantasies happen, whether they're realistic or not. You are a movie maker within your own life, scripting fantastic plots in which you star. You are the one who can see and smell the blooms on a pruned rose bush. Also says, which is significant for this week, gate 41 is at the starting line of all life's experiences, and it's also the beginning of the human design year. It acts a bit like the mind's eye, looking into every conceivable possibility from every angle to find that missing experience that will lead to bring about a sense of completion and wholeness. The danger is that this inclination can lead you into the realms of fantasy land and get you lost in there, similar to what you just said. It pictures campaigns that can save the world, knights in shining armor, and imaginary conversations with icons. It may be best to focus your imagination on more attainable goals. So it's got some brilliance to it.
Yeah. It makes me think of like playing and exploring with this idea of all the things that we're talking about earlier, instinct and intuition and plastic surgery. Like just that word alone kind of like brings up all kinds of thoughts. And around our topic, body, like what is the expectation? What expectations have we had? where we have listened to our instinct and where we have listened to our intuition. Anybody want to play with this?
The thing that comes to my mind is food. Really and truly, like that's the first thing that I think about is appreciating when my body says that it wants more of something, and appreciating when it says that it's full was maybe the first invitation to connection to my body. Because like as a child, it was like clean your plate, right? And like be respectful of the food that we provided here. And even sometimes like a fear-based of like, we don't know when we're going to get this next, not like next meal. Like, I don't want to be dramatic, but you know, like if it was a special occasion, like we don't know when we're going to eat cake again. So you just might as well like eat all of it. Definitely a lot of like disrespect around like not eating the food that's there, which to me led to a lot of overeating and associated like people pleasing, which I took into well into my adulthood of like, do I even want to eat this food anymore? Does my body want this food? Or am I just eating to like make other people feel happy, to be respectful? That's the kind of the first thing that comes to mind.
I have interesting childhood experiences with the Clean Plate Club.
Mm-hmm.
When I was little, I was very sick all the time. Tonsils were just bad. And they were so inflamed that they almost touched until they got taken out. They got taken out at 8. So I had a huge gag reflex, and textures on food just kill me. Well, back in the day, they didn't sell a bag of chicken breasts, right? They cooked the whole chicken, and kids got the chicken legs, and, you know, the breasts were for the parents and that kind of thing, you know, the good parts. And to this day, I can't do fat, gristle, skin. I call them goobers, right? Anything that's considered to be a goober, even though my tonsils were removed and I no longer have that. But the thing was, is I would get told that I had to eat these things. My body's revolting just looking at it. And then, you know, you do that, you get I threw up all the time. I constantly threw up because I couldn't control the gag reflex, number one, and they were forcing me to eat things I didn't, you know, I just thought were gross. And to this day, I don't eat those things. I only buy the bag of chicken breast because I can eat that without gagging. So trying to deal with the extra pressure of my body saying no, but I'm not being allowed to express that or honor that. I'm being forced to shove this down, and then followed up by being
Oh no, we lost your sound.
win situation for me with food.
Come back a little bit.
What?
The audio cut out.
Oh, I don't know where did it cut
I know, I
out?
was trying to think about
When
what
you
we
were
listened
talking about how you were being with food, like being cut off from listening to your body.
Mm-hmm. Being cut off from being able to listen to my body because my body did not want to ingest it because it was already going and then followed up by throwing up, and then because I couldn't control the gag reflex, and then being yelled at because I had thrown up. And you know, the I'm going to say it because it was said to me, it's not a proper thing to say, but what about the poor starving children in Africa? Right? I used to get that all the time as well. And I don't appreciate anything, just like Christy said, you know, either the food or the people who prepared it or anything else. Like, it was offensive that I wouldn't eat it.
Yeah. Like so much programming to like not listen to your body at such a young age, you know?
Yep,
And so
that's
much like
driving
shame
that.
and guilt I know, you know, my story with shame and guilt, but how that was just like rooted. I mean, and how many times do you eat? You know, like 3 at minimum, 5, you know, including snacks and stuff. And that's a lot.
That's that instinct over intuition. And the instinct of our parents being pushed onto us, like food is such a survival thing, and we have all kinds of stories around that. I also was a member of the Clean Plate Club. You didn't know when you were going to get these treats again, so you definitely would gobble them down, and then being forced to eat. Like I remember, so Brenda, I've had some very similar issues as you. I think it's no surprise that I had some of the same tonsils. I used to constantly have strep throat, which I now see as my like exploring that, not being able to express myself, who I am, being stifled. And we were made, my mom wanted to make sure we had balanced meals, and she was a great cook, and she would bring in all kinds of meals from, we had nights where we sat at the dinner and we had tempura, or we would have Italian food, we would have Chinese food, we would have all different kinds of cuisines and cultures, which was great. But we were also required to drink a whole glass of milk every night with dinner so that we made sure we got our calcium. And I was like, I hated milk. Now, if you put a little chocolate or some strawberry in it, I might be okay. But just drinking plain old milk, it made me like, ugh. And I had to choke it down. And, it was like being forced to do something that you don't want to do. And we have a lot of, well, the nutritionists say that you need these things. It is not trusting that our bodies will get what they need, the nutrients that they need. Like times where I was made to eat when I didn't want to, and times where I wanted to eat and was either not allowed or said, well, you can, but it only can be this.
Mhm.
But that's not what my body wanted.
Mhm.
Erin's
Yeah.
got something to
Same.
say.
I'm like, same. I mean, I remember my mom like saying the same thing, like the calcium in the bones. And I'm like, I hate the milk. Like, I don't want to drink the milk, and having to do like the Hershey syrup or like that powder in the, remember the powder in the, I don't know if it was Nesquik or what it
Nesquik.
was, but like, yeah, like, strawberry or chocolate or something like that. And just like not wanting to do those things, and going back to like who's power, who's love, right? Like I think my mom is power. I'm also probably power. And so like there was this constant, I mean, I remember she made meatloaf and I didn't want it. And she was like, that's what you're eating. And I'm like, I'm not eating it. And I mean, I don't remember how long it was, but I know everyone else had a bath. Everyone else like was ready for bed. And I was still sitting at the table, it's like, you're going to eat this. And I'm like, I am not eating the meatloaf. Like I'll go to bed hungry. But you said it, Chrissy, like how much, and when you know better, you do better, right? Like they probably parented that way because they were parented that way. And it's just like, at an early age, teaching ourselves that to not trust what we like, what we enjoy, being able to say no, right? And honoring what our bodies want. And yeah, and then you have so many, so then it's like depending on how you go with it, it becomes either food becomes not a pleasurable thing anymore, right? It's like it's or there's
Battlefield sometimes.
yeah,
Mhm.
certain smells or tastes, or it just brings that body just remembers it and brings back that memory so quickly, and it's just a no. And yeah, just I think about it was almost like, well, this is what I fixed. So if you're not going to eat that, I don't remember if, I mean, clearly I remember that meatloaf story very vividly. I don't remember if I got to make something else. Like I totally, like, if you don't want to eat it, totally fine. Go fix whatever you want. I'm not making 4 meals for the family. Okay, fine. Right. But you can't eat anything else. Yeah. Like it's like shoving it down your throat. Like you're going to take it or you're going to take it. Like that's your 2 options.
And our body is what holds that. It's like our subconscious is basically a culmination of these memories. Because anytime we're in a challenging position, like say you're being forced to eat meatloaf that you are just like, I don't want to eat. My body is saying no to this, and you're forcing me into it. Your body in that moment will code all of the conditions, whatever smells, whatever sounds, all those things that are going on. And the more we start to build these things up and identify them as a stressor, as a place that threatens our well-being, and anytime that we are being taught to go against how we feel inside as a threat to our well-being, those things get coded in our subconscious body. And so then sometimes like we'll have a trigger that puts us into it. It takes us out of our intuition, our inner knowing, and puts us into instinct, because the part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, that's the newer part, that's the rational thinking, that's the able to go, oh geez, I remember the last time I was being told I had to eat meatloaf. Like that, as soon as a threat is identified in the subconscious within the body, a smell, a memory, a sound is triggered, then that part of our brain goes offline immediately, and we're back in that emotional part of our brain, and that is getting us back into the instinct, the amygdala, the part of our brainstem that says I must survive. And so something as simple as you have to finish a glass of milk then becomes a threat to our safety, which then, you know, sets up a pattern of being in stress and on the defense.
It even goes back to last week when we were talking about, crap, I just lost it. Whose body is it? Right? Even to the point of, you know, you're old enough to make the conscious knowledge that this is yucky to me. I don't want it for whatever reason. Doesn't matter why, but your wants and desires for your body are being overridden. It's not yours to control.
Even Brenda,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and Brenda, even you saying, well, you're old enough, like think about a baby, right? Babies are just like, no, peas. There are certain things that I would give Grayson, and she was just a no. And we know at a very early age what we want or what we don't want. And then we finally are actually able to say, like, how many times are you doing the airplane to get the kid to eat the thing, right? But you don't have to do the airplane if they want the thing, right? They just are ready for it. Or the bottle, you know, a baby will just slap the bottle away when they're full, you know, and or breast or whatever it is, right? And I think you said part of it, Tanya, but like when you say instinct, you mean survival. And when you say intuition, you mean creativity or safety or inner knowing, trusting. Yeah. So when we're using those terms, you know, instinct equals survival, fight or flight, freeze, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's, it's kind of like, this is the seed, and then, or think about how much it goes out, right? So I can't trust my body here. And then what else am I not able to like continue to just, or a pebble in a lake, right? It just magnifies how much we don't listen to our bodies because we don't want to lose connection or make our parents mad at us, or what are the repercussions? Some of us might get spanked or beat or, you know, ignored or whatever it might be. So going back to the safety, right? And just a total shutdown of our bodies.
Yeah. I love that you brought up about babies, because that's exactly what I was going to share was, you know, if you look at a baby, if you try to give them something they don't want, they're like, they're just going to spit it right out, right? There's no fanfare about it. I remember when Dominique was little and we were trying different kinds of baby foods. I was like, tried a few things a couple of times, and she was just like, I'm a no. And I got to the point where I was like, I'm going to stop trying to feed her this because she doesn't want it. But there were other things that she did. And the other thing is she metered her food for herself. That was the other thing. Like there would be times where she would be hungry a lot and she would eat a lot. And then there would be other times where she just wasn't very hungry. And if I was trying to put her on a schedule, oh, you need to eat, it's like time for you to eat a meal, then again, I was like not honoring her if I tried to force it. So you think about like, we just, all we have to do is look to babies and we might be able to figure this out. Like, let them choose what they want to eat and what is a yes or no for their little bodies. It goes on into adulthood and when they want to eat.
I think I'm like, I feel like I have 1,000 words that want to come out of my brain right now. Like, really, this is what I talk about every single day. I know, I'm like, how many hours do we have? I love the idea of giving exploration, like giving opportunities of that exploration, because Brenda, when I was hearing you talk about eating the gristle, I'm like, gross, right? And we all have, which I'm a rather, like, my palate is very expanded, so I'm not a picky eater in any capacity, but I work with parents that have picky eaters, and the last step is to put it in their mouth. And I think that's so often what we miss with children. Like, children explore, right? They explore with their fingers, with their smell, with just even just the touching their lips. And so often parents have this like perception of like they need to eat enough, right? Enough vegetables, enough fruit, enough protein, enough calories. And that's all they're focused on is like getting it in their mouth. That like they miss the journey of exploring it. And like peas are my favorite because I'm like, we can squish them, we can throw them in like basketballs, right? We can just play with this food. And when you build that natural curiosity, then they might put it in their mouth and possibly try it. And then they spit it out, right? We don't have this like forced expectation to like ingest it. But to your point, Erin, like with like when we know better, we do better. I don't think that parents know this opportunity sometimes because they have been parented under the philosophy like we did, right? Like you eat what's on your plate and you be grateful for it. And then there are some people that are starting to be a little bit more like open-minded and like allowing intuitive eating to exist with children. Because Erin, Tanya, I had to write this down. You said when you're taught to go against yourself, I'm like, this is so brilliant, right? Like we're teaching children at a very young age, don't listen to your taste buds. I know better than you. Don't listen to your stomach of fullness. I know better than you, right? Like we put these televisions in front of their face and distract them while they're eating just so they'll shove food. And we know that when they're watching TV, their brain cannot focus on the digestion. So it's like tons of disconnection from self. And then we wonder, like, why do we have overweight eaters or, you know, disengaged bodies? And sorry, my soapbox. I just like,
I feel like a
verbally
bobblehead over
vomited.
here.
Sorry.
Yes,
I'm like, I
yes,
just
yes,
verbally
yes.
vomited all over you. This is so important to me. And I just, yeah, sorry. That's it.
No, sorry, needed. And like, I wouldn't zip your lip. I'm just going to unzip right there because like, for those of you that are just listening, Christy just made the motion like she's zipping her lip. And I'm like, no. Let's unzip that.
I know that's my instinct of saying you're talking too much. Right. So,
But this is such an important thing. Like when we realize what you're talking about is allowing children to have this experience, this tactile, and we're in these bodies that smell and taste and feel and sense and see, and like just even food, like food as an experience could be something that's tactile, that's knowing, that's experimentative and exploring, that has this positive experience associated with it versus that disconnection or versus that shame or fear that has been associated with it. I'm not getting enough. I'm getting too much. I'm completely disconnected from my full indicator. Like if we're tuned out when we're eating, if we're watching TV or we're not paying attention, then we're not tuned into our digestion. That's brilliant, because that is so true. When we allow it to be a positive experience, and sometimes that's going to be messy, and sometimes that's going to mean, like we're wearing Cheerios on our face. Oh, interesting face mask.
And it might involve vomiting, like kind of what Brenda was saying, recognizing those natural responses in a body, and like matching it with compassion. I used to have a child, I can remember him so clearly. I would touch the food. I would dip graham crackers in yogurt, and he would be across the table from me, gagging, vomiting. Like his body did not even have to touch it for him to be repulsed by this. And just through exploration and play, we developed this like fun, curious engagement that led to him eating, right? But like matching that vomit with like, I'm so sorry, did that like bother you? Rather than like, what's wrong here? Like Brenda,
or
I want
you're
to
wrong.
Right. I'm like, I want to hug little Brenda right now and just be like, I'm so sorry. That gristle was gross, wasn't it? Like it was gross. And so oftentimes I think instinctively as the parent, and I'm guilty of it myself, I'm not like throwing shame here at all to parents, but it's like, what's wrong with you? Right? Like I do this. My sister hates pickles and I love pickles. And I'm like, why are you over there gagging and like throwing a fit because you got a pickle on your plate? Like that's delicious. And she's like, I cannot eat anything on this plate now because a pickle was on it. Right. And like, I have to see it compassionately for her. That is a repulsive food, even though it's not repulsive to me. Right. So like matching that instinctive response that they have going on with like compassion and love. And of course,
That's
my
when
sister's grown and she doesn't care to expand her palate to like pickles, and that's okay. But
yeah, so it's like asking the question, is that something you care to change?
yes, I loved your question. I still think that's the most brilliant question I've ever been asked. Like, is this something you want to do? And children can't really offer that response, right? So sometimes we do need to defer to parents. Like, do you have a nutritional concern? Do you have a caloric concern for your children? And how can we meet them and like help them build through curiosity and expansion rather than like forcing it in their mouth?
I realize that this is a concept that is still very far out for a lot of people, but I look forward to the day when we can actually look at our children and see them as the greatest gift that we have to teach us a new way, instead of having to be like, oh, we've got these guidelines that we need to fit in, these nutritional concerns that we need to fit in. If we're just looking at our children and saying, they know better than I do, I'm just going to give them lots of options and see what clicks for them.
I will say,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was saying when the children were little, I know we're going to do it anyway, but when the children were little, I took mine a different path, right? You do with what you know. So I knew that there was no way I was going to force them to eat things because I had been forced to eat things. However, I did take it one step though and say, you must try one bite of something new. You can't just tell me you don't like it if you've never even tried it. And that worked. I don't think they're permanently scarred from that, but just to get them to try. And if they put it in their mouth and it was no, fine. But I didn't allow them to just look at it and say no, which is one step better. It's still not necessarily perfect, but it was one step better because they at least some things they did like and some things they didn't like. And then I never forced them to eat what they tried and then didn't like. It was like I put enough for one forkful on the plate and said, you're going to try this. But, that was 30 years ago too. So.
And now there's even evidence that says like 20 attempts is what it would take for a child to like really decide. Now we're talking about toddlers, right? Like not grown adults, but to think about, I mean, how many times have you been with a toddler where they're like, I love bananas, I'm going to eat 5 of them today. And then the next day they're like, bananas, that's repulsive. Like they really don't have like a strong like decision making. A lot of times it's like a control that they're looking for. But one suggestion that I like to offer is like try it 20 times, like with no pressure, right? Like I love that you had this like expectation to just try, because then you're putting them in the space of like just deciding whether or not they like it or not, rather than like you must.
You must try, but once you try.
And also like, what does try mean? Like, can you just put it in your mouth and spit it out?
Some
Does it
days
have to
that
be
happens.
swallowed? Yeah. I think
Some
that's
days
super
that
fair.
happens.
If you put an oyster, I was like, I just thought of one food, raw oyster, I will not do.
That's a texture thing for me. Even if I just
Yes.
touch it, I'm like, oh, that's a no.
Dude,
But
it's
some people
looking
are
at that
just
slimy
love
thing.
those things.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
Sorry, Erin, your turn.
Yeah.
I think Abraham has talked about this before too, is like, we can't, going back to what Tanya was saying, is like, we can't parent. We try to parent, but we can't parent from a lower vibration, right? And so going back to like our children being our teachers, we're like, Jason and I were just talking about this the other day, like do as I say, not as I do. And not that there's a right way or a wrong way of what we eat, right? But sometimes as parents, you've got parents that are, let's just use like a fast food example, but then they want their children to eat all of their vegetables. It's like, but as the parent, you're not doing what you want your children to do. So it's like, here we go back to like, it's different for me, but I'm going to teach you what you need to do. But how is that example? And also it's just like a trusting, going back to the body of, we were eating dinner with this other family after we had surfed together, and Grayson just orders whatever she wants to order. And the little girl sitting next to me was like, I wish I could just order what I wanted. And her mom was like, you can't, you've had too much bread. Don't eat the butter. You've had too much of this, you've had too much that. And I just sat back and watched, but it's this awareness, right? As parents, like how often are we like, don't do these things or stop doing this? And, and our children are just like sponges, right? And so all of, and you just think about where obviously our beliefs come from, right? About food, but clearly bread in their family was a bad thing because they had eaten too much of it. Even when the little boy, because Jason had like broken open a coconut and the boy was eating the entire 1/2 of the coconut meat. And he was just sitting at the table, just eating the coconut meat. And the dad was like, you've had too much. It was almost like you've had too much of all of these different things. Stop eating too much. Which I don't know who was talking about enough, right? Like who decides what's enough for my body, right?
I'm guilty of that.
Self-regulation.
I'm guilty of that big time. And I know we were talking about this kind of like last week on a side conversation about me having fear. And that was something that when you just said like, you can't parent from a lower vibration, I'm like, my vibration tends to be, or my instinct tends to be fear. Like I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I don't step in and establish a boundary. And one thing that I'm trying to do more of, and granted my kids are 14 now, so they're a little older, but is building that space of me allowing them to do whatever and trusting that that's their learning. That is a very difficult space for me. But it feels better, right? Like when I think about what am I teaching? What am I giving an opportunity to be learned here? I don't want to always be controlling their food and telling them when they should and shouldn't eat what. I want them to learn that connection to their body. Like, when you do eat 1,000 grams of sugar in a day, like, how does that make your body feel? Come to your own conclusion. Sugar is usually my thing. That's usually like, you've had enough.
Can I ask you a curious question?
Yeah.
What have you noticed for yourself? You said it's difficult for me to, let them do that or
Mhm.
explore that. What has that meant for you? Like, if I always talk about turning everything back to ourselves.
Mm.
So I think about, for me, like, beliefs, expectations, that I had put on our daughter while we were raising her. Then I now look at turning those concepts and beliefs back onto myself. What has the exploration with your kids allowed you to explore within yourself, and how does that feel?
Yeah. I think one thing that I can identify is my judgment that I have on food. So, thinking that sugar equals bad is like my story. And I have evidence to support that, right? Like, I know how my body responds when I have types of foods or whatever. But to me, that's not fair to them to impose that, right? Because they're their own entity, they're their own genetic makeup. Um, so to me, it's like it's the judgment story, I think, more than anything that's been revealed to me. Does that answer your question? I'm like, my brain is experiencing a little bit of a high right now, like a euphoric.
A little 64, kind of like
Mhm.
an air of confusion of the
Mhm.
I don't know, but I'm wondering if I might have just unlocked a little delicious morsel in there for you to ponder, to savor a
Yeah.
little bit. Erin, this makes me think about the conversation that you and I had on a walk that one day about Lucky Charms. So
Hmm.
when I was younger and I would go over to my grandmother's house, my grandmother always had all of the good stuff. Um, I was basically an only child until my mom met my other mother when I was around, like, I think it was around 9 years old, 9 or 10 years old. And one of the things that we always had were things like Lucky Charms or Cinnamon Toast Crunch or things like that. And I loved having those for breakfast, and I would have a bowl. But then when my other mother came and moved in with her two kids, the oldest boy would, he'd be able to sit down and eat an entire box of Lucky Charms. And so we stopped getting Lucky Charms. The we got basically whatever Costco carried in bulk, which was usually like Tostios or something like
Mm.
that. And then when my grandmother passed away, I didn't have her place to go over to have all the treats and things that I wanted. She had ding dongs and ho hos and Cheetos and whatever it was that I might possibly have wanted to consume. Um, so having that taken away from me, having been told that I couldn't have those treats, for me then made me, I was associating that with not being as special or not being able to have these treats. And then when I got a little older and could buy them for myself, it was like, well, those aren't good for you.
Mhm.
That's bad for you. That's too much sugar. Because at that point, I had crossed into that teenagehood line of, well, I've got to manage my weight. I went through that era of fat free, sugar free, all the things were bad for you. Danger, danger. You're going to get fat or die of diabetes. And so there was a very big resistance to not eat those things. And yet I wanted them because they were the things that I associated with being special. So I remember when Erin and her family were here, and I would like, on one hand, I would watch Grayson eat an entire carrot, and she was just like, nom, 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 nom. And then Erin and Grayson made some of the cookies that I had gotten in the fridge. And then I watched Grayson just like have one and then have another and then have another. And I was like, I wasn't saying anything until we went for our walk. And Erin said, "How are you feeling?" And I said, "So uncomfortable right now." And she's like, "Why?" And I realized it was the Lucky Charm thing. It was the, I was like, look at her and she can just eat whatever she wants. She doesn't have any beliefs or expectations or thoughts about food. And I'm like, I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that our bodies, no matter what we eat, convert it to sugar. Convert it to sugar. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like all of my beliefs right now are just getting like this, like just totally messed up, totally like it's like this chaos storm of beliefs. And I'm just kind of like, yeah. So kind of brings me back to this whole discussion about like good food, bad food, too much sugar, not enough, being disconnected from our bodies. What stories do we have about food? What stories do we have about our connection? What stories are we putting into this food that we're eating, which is then what essentially programs our body, just like we program our body to disease and disorder. It's our beliefs and our thoughts. It's the environment in which the cell is existing. Because the body is going to take anything we give it and turn it into sugar because that's its fuel.
Right.
It's so interesting because, and I think kids are so logical and they like make so much sense, but and Grayson will go over to my mom's house and my mom is still in some of her old patterns, right? And Grayson will eat a pound of strawberries and blueberries and carrots and like pound a whole 2 English cucumbers. I mean, just all the things. And my mom's like, you can't have your cucumbers until you eat your peanut butter and crackers. And Grayson's like, but I want my cucumber. My mom's like, but you need your protein. And Grayson's like, a Ritz manufactured cracker over what the earth just provided for me? Like, what sense is this making? But it goes back to like how we've been conditioned, right? And like forcing, I mean, I guess thankfully Grayson's strong enough to be like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm eating, give me more cucumbers or whatever it is that she wants at that time. But going back to the beliefs, right? Like somewhere, like that's what people ask us, well, where do you get your protein? I'm like, from the food that we eat. Like somewhere we've been conditioned with protein has to come from an animal, you know? And it's just like, it's so fascinating just to going back to like your beliefs and bread is bad, right? Like you can have whole wheat bread, but regular bread is bad or, you know, whatever. It's just like, sometimes sourdough bread just tastes really good.
Wow.
Going back to like, what does our body want, you know?
Also, I'm like really curious about a sentence that Tanya, when you mentioned something about like the fat-free era or whatever, like look at just how our culture has shifted just with more research and just kind of like human studies to now we're like almost trying to wipe out that way of thinking that fats are bad. Right? Like now we have a ton of evidence to support like healthy fats are actually really good, you know, and they're like necessary. And you have this generation of people that are like, oh, I can't eat fat. And it's like, no, your body needs fat. There's a value to that.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting to me.
And it, like, to finish off that story, I ended up going to the store and buying a a jumbo, like a big box of Lucky Charms. And I was like, I'm gonna eat some Lucky Charms.
Mm.
And of course, I didn't go with regular milk. I went with like a vanilla almond milk. Um, but I had me a bowl of Lucky Charms and I was like, oh, this is so good. This is so good. And then I had a second bowl. I was like, you eat as much as you want, girl.
Mm.
So I had a second bowl. And then I was like, burp, burp. I'm like, oh, well, my body's not apparently enjoying this as much as I thought it would. And I had a few more individual bowls, but after that, I was like, I don't need or want this anymore, because that whole story that was attached to why I wanted it completely shifted and changed. So yeah, like
Look at what a child taught you. Right.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah. So I have been exploring this idea with food now, with the nourishment, with my body, that there should be pleasure before, during, and afterwards.
I like that concept a lot.
Before any anticipation of eating it, do I need to play with it? Do I need to have it on my hands? Do I need to smell it? Do I need to stop and savor the taste? Notice the taste after I've swallowed it. How is it with my saliva? That's the during. And then after, like the Lucky Charms, every time afterwards, I had the wheat burps.
Yeah.
Like there was just something about the non-candy part of the Lucky Charms. It just wasn't sitting with my stomach anymore. And I was like, all right, body, like if that's how you roll, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like I'm just gonna
And we
accept
need to
that.
send you the bag of just the marshmallows.
Oh, right.
I put those in my chocolate, not
Wasn't
dairy milk.
wasn't that genius to manufacture that? Like, let's just kill it with the grain part. Let's just go straight charms.
Yeah, that's my life. Straight charms, no grain.
Mhm. Well, and I think something that I don't know that I have this concept like solidified in my head, but when we can pull the shame out of the food, then we can just really get into like the quality of it, right? Like for you to explore the Lucky Charms with no guilt, no shame, right? We're not going to judge
Exactly.
it that it's sugar. We're not going to judge that it's gluten. We're not going to judge that it's dairy, right? And
Yep.
we're just like experiencing this. And then your body got to tell you,
Burp.
oh, that one didn't settle so well, right? Or like your stomach was like, I'm full.
Hmm.
You know, we don't have the shame cycle, because I always think about like I love brownies, like love brownies, especially the extra crispy edges and then
Oh
the
my God,
chewy
yes.
middle. And I used to eat brownies and then have this like horrible like inner critic telling me how bad it was, right? It's bad for you. You have no self-control, like all the story. And then I felt like crap because I was eating the brownies. So then I wanted more brownies because that made me feel good. Right. And it's like
Mhm.
when I just like took the shame story out of it, now I just have a bite of brownie and I like enjoy it thoroughly. And I don't need any more. I'm just like one bite at like a little corner. My husband will go, is that really all you're going to eat? I'm like, oh my gosh, I just enjoyed like, it's still like in my mouth lingering. I loved every minute of it. And
Uh-huh.
if I do want more, I get more, but I usually just like want one or two bites and that's it.
Yeah.
But I think I needed to really drop the story, which admittedly I need to do more with my children, by the way. Like it's given me an opportunity to do it here. And now for me to like better
And
with them.
that is the answer to the question that I asked of you.
It just took
Yeah.
me a minute to get it out.
Of course. Yeah, I realized like I use EFT a lot, the tapping to help Like I've used it to help rid myself of allergies and certain reactions that my body has to certain things. And I thought about tapping out the the grain part of the Lucky Charms burp, right, that was coming up. But then I just decided, I was like, you know what? I'm actually just going to be like, you know what, body, this is the feedback you're giving me. And I'm not so invested in Lucky Charms because I no longer have a story attached to them that this is what I want to eat. So then I moved on to something, other things that I enjoy eating, start, middle, and end, before, during, and after, that felt just naturally good with my body. And it was like, I still use EFT a lot to allow those stories to shift. And there are times when it's like, nope, you know what? I'm just going to like take my own body's word for it in this particular instance. And that is, I think, true empowerment, when we can really just listen to ourselves and to reauthor, redesign the story that we've been telling. Because that's like, as humans, that's what we do. We're storytellers. We always have a story to tell about things. But finding our authenticity, who we truly are at the core, authenticity contains the word, the root of the word author. We are the writers of the story. So what kind of story do we want to be writing about the food that we eat, how we listen and interact with our bodies? Who owns them? Who creates them? So
I love that you just said that, because I think it just really highlights the opportunity to be more intuitive than instinctive, right? Habitual, because I think we are just naturally, as a human species, habitual. You know, we habitually breathe. I mean, I know that's probably like more, there's more chemical in there too, but like there's just so many things that we just do. I mean, I know when I have been asked questions, people will say, like, why do you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, it just happens. It's just like what I've always done, you know? But
mhm.
to recognize the opportunity of being the author, the opportunity to lean into your intuition, because we can appreciate that some of our upbringing, a lot of our conditioning has made it more instinctive than intuitive, right?
Yeah,
And so just finding, like, food is just one subject matter, our body is just one subject matter, but like all of these little pieces put together, it's like bringing us back to who we are, letting us be the author to say, like, is this how I want to treat my body? Is this the story that I want to tell about the food? On and on. Like,
yeah.
so
It's
beautiful.
it's so important because so our prefrontal cortex, our rational brain, our logical mind only has so much energy and capacity to think about new things, to create, etc. That's why so much of our story is pattern. It's held in the body, the story we tell, because if we were to have to think about, how do I get up and walk? How do I breathe? How do I make this muscle move this way? We would have no capacity or room, or we'd have to eat all the time because the amount of energy it would take. So those things get automated. They are learned by the body, and the body is what just executes those programs. Oh, you want to get up and walk? This is how you do it. Oh, you need to push your wheelchair? This is how you do it. Oh, you need to eat something? This is how you do it. Oh, you need to breathe? I'm just going to do all of these things for you under whatever program it was that I learned to do that.
Mhm.
And for us to basically hack the system, we have to first figure out what it is that we're thinking and believing.
Mhm.
And oftentimes that's in conversation, that's with each other, that awareness starts to come up. And then we have to ask ourselves, is this the narrative that I want to stick with? And that is when we take instinct, that body's ability to just do without having to consciously think about it. And we turn it to intuition. We start listening to our inner knowing.
I love it. And I think your question is always so pivotal. I've labeled it your question. I don't know if you generated it yourself or if you brought
That's
it
what
from
came out
somewhere
of me in
else.
that moment.
Okay, so then it was. I'm like, that was such a pivotal moment when you were like, is this something that you want to change? You know, for that to be such a compassionate space that we can even ask ourselves. Right. Like I think about my sister with pickles. Like if I were to ask her, is that something that you want to change? She would be like, absolutely not. I don't want to ever learn how to eat pickles, you know,
Or have them on my plate.
or ever. Right. I mean, she is like, this is a solid no. My husband would do the same thing. He's not a condiments person. I'm like, is that something that you would want to change? He's like, no. I'm like, I personally think you're missing out on all the quality of life, but it's okay.
How you doing, Brenda? You're on mute.
I was just
Like,
saying,
I'll-
I was just writing myself some notes to think about later.
I always got to check in with a projector and our generator too.
I'm good.
Because us many gens are just like,
Like Yosemite Sam, the Energizer Bunny. Dum, 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 dum.
Here we go. We've talked about this before. I think, I don't remember what episode it was, but our bodies, we have all of our five senses for pleasure, right? And we constantly deny ourselves pleasure. Like, I mean, we call it food porn, but I mean, like this is like in Santa Teresa, this is like the vegan capital of Costa Rica. I don't know. It's just like beautifulness everywhere. And the way it's like, oh my gosh, I told Jason, I'm like, this is food porn. Like, this is beautiful, right? Talking about what Tanya's talking about, like enjoying it. Like when she brings it out, I mean, like gives me chills right now. I'm like, this is beautiful. And the amount of time that they took to make it, right? And it's, and then, you know, you get to taste it. So we get to first see it with our eyes and then we get to taste it and feel it. And it's just like all of our senses. And I know we haven't talked about sex yet, but right, pleasure in our bodies, pleasure in eating, pleasure in all of the things. And we're constantly I think as a society in a denial phase. Like it's always a restriction, right? Of things for our bodies versus like what Tanya's talking about from a love place, like this feels good. And sometimes what feels good in our body is to say no, right? Like, okay, I had a little bit too much of my food and I don't want any more.
well, and also to that point, like when you expand your input of pleasure, likely you're not going to lean into the whole pan of brownies, right? Like I wasn't leaning into a whole pan of brownies when I was having a good day. I was like coming home from a stressful work day and being like, give it all to me. Wine, brownies, cheese, all of it. Right. But on my good days, I was like, yeah, I'll have a bite. Right. But like giving myself that opportunity to like find pleasure in other ways, expanding my satisfaction shows me too, like kind of tapping into those other senses. Right. Like, and winter is a challenging season for me in Kentucky because it's brown and gray and cold. And so I've like really been challenged lately to just be like, how am I finding satisfaction right now? That's not.
But you love being curled up in a nice blanket with your coffee, right? That's pleasurable, right? That warm blanket and that your book you talk about, like,
and
that's
my dog
so pleasurable.
and my hot box, my sauna box that I go to. Yeah, it's like, but I'm challenging my brain to find other ways of finding satisfaction. Again, I do love food in the sense of like, well, like tons of varieties, right? But in my experimentation with myself, the more satisfaction that I'm finding in my day, the less I find myself leaning into those moments of like craving something, right? Like having those insatiable needs for something. Like it's just not existing as much.
And when it does, how are you speaking to yourself?
Lately, I'm trying to think about realistically, sometimes I don't even have things in my house. But sometimes it's like asking, like, do you really want a bite of ice cream? Do you really want a brownie or a donut? And allowing it, like just almost giving like permission to it. Sometimes sitting with the discomfort and like, it's okay. Like you're going to get your ice cream. It might not be today. It might be tomorrow. Like, just it's almost like I'm having a conversation with a toddler that just really needs something, right? And they're just like melting down and crying, and like my body just wants to like meh. And sometimes I actually do.
That's so good.
Literally pout like a toddler. Yeah, but like just seeing like, yeah, no, you're really disappointed right now. It's okay. And even sometimes just even knowing like next time I'm at the grocery, I'm going to get ice cream. It like satisfies my need, right? Like it's really not the ice cream, like the actual ingestion. It's more like the permission that I think I'm looking for.
I also wonder too if it's being heard.
That was exactly what my brain just interpreted from what I just said. Yes. It's like my disappointment, my frustration, whatever that emotional trap I'm in that moment, just wanted to be seen.
So beautiful.
Yeah. It was really cool.
Well, for not having any expectations or for not having a plan, we figured it out.
We can just roll on down the hill.
I think we have one more week on the topic of body. And then, geez, maybe the next section we do is around sex.
Oh, that would be exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And uncomfortable.
Pretty much
like, I mean,
life.
really just these are the conversations that I remember. And Erin, you might have kind of sparked this with me just about like, oh, you don't walk around your house naked?
I love how I'm the person that sparks all the things and all the people.
I know you have a lot of good. Are you a provoker? I think she is, isn't she?
Yes, I am.
So of course you are.
She and Brenda both.
Okay. Brenda's just like the silent provoker. Or like the more like, I don't know.
Not always.
Not always, right? Yeah, I'm like, it's like the forbidden conversation. I took my kids to their well check today, and the pediatrician was talking about like the risk-taking subjects like drugs, alcohol, sex. And she just kept talking about it, and they're just kind of staring at her like she's, or they were like deer in headlights. And she said, I know it's really uncomfortable and your parents probably don't talk about this. And I was like, oh no, we talk about it. Like, and it's uncomfortable for me. I don't know how uncomfortable it is for them, but.
This goes back to what we were talking about last week, right? Like, why is sex? Sex is a pleasurable thing. Yes. It happens in our body. It feels really good.
Yes.
Why is that any different than saying, yeah, my spouse and I don't know,
went out to dinner.
See it pulse. Well, yeah, went swimming, went out to dinner, like, because we make it this taboo thing versus like, yeah, it feels good. It's fun.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And as parents to 14-year-olds, I'm like, yeah, let's also have some reservation, but it's okay. We can find our balance. We can find our win-win.
Any final last words from anyone before we come to a close? As always, so much pleasure before, during, and after.
Always.
Love you guys.
Bye.